Hey everyone, it's Ivan with kitbadger.com out here for another gun review, and today talking 22s. This little guy right here, which is the LDR rifle with a steel barrel from Grey Birch Manufacturing. I mentioned steel barrel because this was also offered in a carbon fiber barrel. And I say was offered because, man, sometimes I get things and I shoot them and then I shoot them some more, and then eventually I'll turn time for a review because I'll have enough time with it and they won't make that anymore. But you can absolutely still get these, and you can absolutely get this, which is their lot chassis, I believe, for the 1022. They make it for a number of other different models as well. But you can definitely find these guns out there, even if they're no longer manufacturing right now, and they're coming out with something new, which will largely just build on a bunch of the features. But yeah, I'll tell you about this gun. If you're unfamiliar, a while ago, Ruger's patent on the 1022 came up, and as a consequence, a lot of people started making 22s. And so the LDR rifle by Grey Birch was basically a Ruger 1022, kind of at its heart. And with that, you have all the same controls, to include obviously the fire control group, which is cool because there's a number of different ones you can get. 1022 magazines, whether it's a 10-round box or any of your other extended ones. And yeah, but they did some cool stuff. And I guess kind of show you a close-up of that, as well as some of the cool stuff with this chassis. Starting at the back here, you have both adjustable length of pull as well as adjustable comb height. Really easy to adjust with that hex head. And one thing they do have, which, man, close, they did actually put QDs in here, which is cool. They are, however, my least favorite, which is they are, well, not limited rotation. So if you put a QD in there, it'll just swivel all around. Not my favorite. They do have a bag rider. I'll show you that in a minute. One thing I really like is when you come around, that hinge is super solid lockup. And to loosen the hinge, what you end up doing is basically pushing this direction. So you're pushing this part that way, and then it'll release the hinge, otherwise comes out, locks up. And looking back here, this is actually their grip they made, which is pretty cool. And then it'll take basically any AR pattern grip, which is actually really nice. And then as far as the chassis part, again, drop in any 1022 like frame, in that the dimensions that this will take is pretty much your standard 1022, to include theirs that they made. And with that, giant billet piece, and so up top you actually have built-in pick rail, which is really awesome, super secure for mounting optic. And then the spiral fluted barrel, I think it's pretty rad. And the chassis also, you have M-lock on the sides, super light. The other thing I like is Arca rail, so you can drop this thing right onto a tripod. Something else kind of cool is basically kind of a built-in barricade stop. So if you're to throw this over the top of something, you can drive that thing in, it'll grab. And then of course, one of my favorite features is this is actually a threaded barrel. So 16.1 inches fluted steel. And yeah, this thing is a ton of fun to shoot. So I guess that in part brings me to what has been my experience and how have I used this. I've put a lot of rounds through this gun, and part of it is 22s, especially suppressed, probably the most fun you're gonna have shooting. Like, I really enjoy it. Like, it's just tons of fun, to include subsonic, where you don't need ear pro. Like, it is crazy quiet. And yeah, my boys and I have shot this gun a lot. Other places I've used it, aside from like range outings, is actually shot a competition with this. Something pretty fun is NRL 22, where, yeah, you're basically shooting PRS at about 200 yards. In that, you will have targets anywhere generally from about 50 yards out to 200, and then sometimes out past that, out to maybe 4. Like at our range, they'll have a 400-yard target, and you are basically shooting PRS with a 22. On the one hand, you'll be like, this will be way less expensive, but no. People spend just as much on 22s as they do PRS rifles. I definitely shot this, and one, I'm not the best shooter, but the gun did not hold me back. But it's really cool because you get to go through all of those principles, fundamentals, everything of shooting long range, just without having to have like 1,000-yard range. And so for the way I have this set up actually is one back here. This is really handy. This little dope chart right here is by Sobcheck Security. Yeah, Sobcheck Security, LLC. And it basically breaks it down every 25 yards, which is handy because there was a lot of drop. And when it comes to shooting that stuff, generally, you're always going to shoot subsonic 22 because it is just loaded way better. You end up with a much better, more consistent, like shot to shot, so your accuracy ends up better. And yeah, with that, it drops a bunch. So you end up dialing a lot. Like, what's my 400-yard dope? Oh, I don't even have it on here, only to 350, which is 19.7 mils. Pretty significant, like you're cranking that. But it's really cool because again, you just get to work all those fundamentals at much closer distances. The other place I've shot this a lot is ground squirrels. So if you have been around a ranch, farm, things like that, probably aware, ground squirrels, super destructive, just end up wrecking fields. And so pretty much every farmer rancher is like, get after it. And a buddy of mine, Sparky, who has a huge hunting lease down in kind of southern Idaho, ended up going down there and just that, got after it. And being able to go through and hunt with this thing, and again, kind of back to that NRL 22, you're ranging things and it might be like 50 yards, which not super close, or out to like 150 to whatever it is, and being able to actually have to dial your dope, get a good solid shooting position, generally shooting off a tripod for my own part, and yeah, hold for wind, all of those things come into play. Put a lot of rounds through this rifle. Of course, people's question with any gun is it a laser? Man, I've yet to shoot a laser, and if I did, I would probably still miss and it won't be a laser, but I ended up going out there to get the best groups I could shoot, and for that, also, I guess I should speak to it with respect to competition, stuff like that. I ended up actually pretty much mostly, I think, using this, and this is one of the older Arkin EP4 4-16 by 50 first focal plane mil scope. Did a good job for me. It's beefy, it's heavy, and these rings are actually super heavy F3R rings. But the gun itself is actually light, which, okay, real quick before I get into accuracy, something I should probably speak to is, because with respect to the chassis, which you can get, even if it's not with this gun, I really like the chassis. It's cool. It does a lot of things, i.e. being able to have M-LOK, built-in ARCA rail, has front back QDs, even though they are not limited rotation. Wish they were. It's a weird mix though. And when I say weird mix is you have something that arguably, like the chassis itself, really light with a bunch of features made to kind of be really heavy. When you think about putting something onto a tripod ARCA rail, or for that matter, we'll just say competition, because it's kind of what you think of when you see this. Everything's heavy. Like the meta is get the biggest, heaviest gun with the lowest recoiling round. And so in NRL 22, you'll have like 15-pound guns because they just do not move. Spot round, like dropping in subsonic, all that stuff. And same with PRS too. Really heavy guns, light recoiling, that won't move. This has a bunch of those kind of features, but is really light. It does great. I love the fact that you can shoot this thing off a tripod, or for that matter, put a bipod on here, move it back and forth very easily. But as far as something built to be really lightweight that you would just like snap shoot or something like that, especially with a little red dot, which is actually really fun on this, this is not as conducive as something else, which is why you don't see most things, unless they're made to shoot off of a bipod or a tripod, with ARCA rail. Just not the most comfortable thing. But yeah, quick aside there. Okay, back to shooting groups though. So I ended up going out with this, and shooting the best groups I could. I ended up going to shoot a bunch of 10-round groups, and I will show you my 8-shot groups, only because there's a number of factors. One, me being the biggest factor, also wind, shooting at 100. Usually most people in NRL 22, stuff like that, you actually zero this stuff at 50 yards. So I dialed, I think, up like 2 mils or something like that to get on paper at 100. But I ended up largely just shooting a bunch of 10-shot groups. I'll show you the 8-shot groups, which is probably more indicative of the gun and the ammo versus like the biggest variable being me, the shooter. Starting off initially with some Gemtech subsonic 42 grain. My group came in 8 shots at 1.46 MOA. Then switching over to some SK red box, my next group came in at 2.19 MOA. And the best grouping ammo I had was actually some of the purple box SK target load, coming in at just over 1 MOA with those 8 rounds. And I'll own those other 2 as flyers. Next, shooting some Ely subsonic 38 grain. My group came in 8 shots at 1.17 MOA. And somehow with this Winchester subsonic 42 grain, I ended up with only 9 rounds, and here's all 9 of them coming in at 2.6 MOA. You can definitely see a pretty good solid group. Those others could totally be me. Then switching over to some supersonic 32 grain Stinger. Man, the stuff really opened up. And again, I ended up with 9 shots. I have no idea where the 10th went, but with 9, it was at 6.29 MOA. Then moving over to some CCI Mini Mag high velocity 40 grain. My group, 8 shots coming in at 1.93 MOA. And then the best performing supersonic I used was their CCI Velocitor, super fast hollow points, 40 grain. And this group came in 8 shots at 1.86 MOA. Would have I liked better groups? Honestly, I'm sure another shooter could get better groups. Like, I was not shooting those super slow, was not waiting for the barrel to cool, not that this thing actually warms up much, and it's what I got out there that day. Honestly, I've been really pleased with this though, and depending on the load, like, this thing will absolutely hold at least 1 MOA in my experience. Again, those are just the groups I got out there that day. And I guess along those lines, worth noting, supersonic, man, it's crazy. Like, that's what most people shoot, honestly, just to go plink and stuff like that. But as far as accuracy, and my guess is they actually just pay attention to how many grains of powder they throw in the subsonic, because they're trying to keep it below that threshold of breaking the sound barrier. And yeah, as a consequence, as far as target accuracy, stuff like that, your subsonic is just usually going to perform better. Which, I guess, all of those things in mind, what are my thoughts overall? Well, as I mentioned, while I really like this chassis, it is one of those where it's kind of a weird paradox as far as being lightweight and handy with all of the features where you probably want weight. Having said that, does it really matter? Not really, because again, part of the meta, if you want to turn this into a gaming gun, is adding weights. And you have all the M-LOK slots, you can actually add weights out. And Dependabuilt, aka Sawtooth Rifles, they actually make weights that will stack on each other. So you only have so many M-LOK slots, but you can actually stack out and get this thing really heavy if that's what you're trying to do. Again, most of my shooting, well, a little bit's done shooting competition. Most of it's actually out there shooting groundhogs, or ground squirrels rather. And this thing does amazing. And I think some of the value with 22s, especially this one, because it is accurate, basically being able to practice all of those skills you would be practicing shooting long range at closer ranges. Whether it is like NRL 22 or, as I mentioned, out there actually hunting ground squirrels. Having to actually range things, figure out what your dope is, dial or hold depending on your optic, and yeah, really great for skill building. have I ran into any issues with this gun? The only one I actually ran into, which is probably just tolerance is too tight, this thing is really well made, is once this thing gets dirty, it does not want to just eject rounds if you have a live round in there. I've never had it ever not eject a round when you fired it, as far as actually grab it and throw it, but for whatever reason, as soon as you start shooting, like think shooting a match, pretty soon it gets so dirty that if you try and just clear it out, it doesn't want to clear out, in my experience. Again, sample size of 1. But yeah, other than that, this thing has done an amazing job for me. And real quick, before I forget, they do make a bag rider, which is pretty cool. And so this piece actually, there's holes back here, and this actually bolts in right there. And now you have a bag rider, which is actually pretty nice. I didn't end up using it that much, in part because honestly, I just didn't usually have a rear bag in most of the shooting I was doing. There were times when I wish I had it, shooting some of the NRL 22, but usually out there shooting, like especially ground squirrels, usually just sitting off of a tripod, so it didn't really come in handy for me. But they do make it, and it's pretty cool. As I mentioned, this gun is no longer available, but you can still find them out there on the secondary market, gun broker, stuff like that. And they did actually make a version with a carbon fiber barrel, which is pretty cool. Definitely a lighter setup. And they are coming out with a newer one. The newer one has a bunch of upgraded features, things like that, to include double guide rods inside here and some pretty cool stuff. And you can definitely get the chassis. Something cool about the chassis too is kind of comes a la carte. For example, doesn't come with a grip, but you can absolutely get this, or die-free Kung Fu grip, or of course just put your own grip on it. They also make it, because this is 2 pieces, this front end, so you can get different length of front end, and kind of some other odds and ends, like stuff they make in-house, to include bolts, which is pretty cool, because some of the ones you get from Ruger, like kind of hit or miss. Definitely better quality. And you can also get like upgraded trigger packs, things along those lines. But if you're interested in any of this stuff, they'll be linked down below and you can go check it out. And as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.